Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for Politically Incorrect Knitters. I'm Deplorable Knitter. I've got Ann Pinkova and Neil at Blocked Magazine here, and one of the ugly cats.
Yeah, and this is North Star.
Yeah, and we decided to do a little talk about some of the nonsense that's going on right now. I'm sure everybody's heard of the Roe versus Wade ruling that was leaked. What was it, a week ago, 2 weeks ago now?
Yeah, and specifically where it affects the knitting community, which we talk about very often. And if there's anything crazy going on in the world at large, believe me, there are yarn dyers who will latch on to that and get crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
So can I ask, has that is it legislation that's gone through? Has it actually gone through?
No, we live in a world dictated by judges. So this is a case that went through 50 years ago and have slowly tried to get it overturned. So this is the Supreme Court ruling.
And somebody leaked the information, didn't he? Is that right?
Right, which is also huge news, that you have the essays and the deliberation about the different decisions by the judges, why they're for or against overturning it. And yeah, that information being leaked, because it's not finalized at that point, you could still go in and change your mind. So it is coercion of the judge, basically, to threaten them to not make the final decision.
So whoever did that would be in some serious trouble, couldn't they, if they get caught?
Well, in theory, I heard it was a liberal justice's clerk. So who knows what's actually going to happen? So
there's
they were probably told to do it, weren't they? Nudge to do that for them.
Well, there's a little rumor about Sonia Sotomayor doing it herself. So unsubstantiated. But
I heard that it was her clerk, but she seems to be at the basis of whatever this is. So
she's the worst. Okay, there's a lot of the worst going on, but she was appointed by Obama, and talk about just brick dumb.
Is she the new judge?
No,
not the newest. No. So I mean, like, competition for stupidity.
No, she's been around for a while because Obama appointed her. So she's been at least 6 years on the bench, probably longer, because that's when Obama was in office. So she's been on it for a while. But
I've not heard of her before. So it's only the new ones I know of. Kavanaugh and I've forgotten her name now. The one that has adopted the children. What was she called?
Amy Barrett Coney.
That's it. Yeah.
I can never remember which way her name goes.
Comey, I think.
But it's close, whatever. But Neil and I were chatting before this got started, and we were saying it would be really great if we had somebody who didn't agree with us who could have an adult conversation. But unfortunately, I don't know anybody who can have an adult conversation when they disagree with somebody. So I'm sorry. But what I did want to know about from Neil, though, is that, Ann and I are both pro-life. And that's because, I mean, not solely because of our religion, but, a lot of our views in our life are based on the fact that we are Christians and we believe certain things. And so, Neil, I wanted to know, you've said that you're not religious. And so where does, how do you come to this point with us?
Well, it's a strange one, because when I was religious, when I was young, I was brought up as a Catholic. I was probably pro-abortion then, so I've kind of gone the opposite way around. And I think it was, I'm one of those awful people where if someone says you aren't allowed to do something, I kind of go the opposite way. So when the Pope is saying you can't kill, babies, I was like, yes, you can, that kind of nonsense,
Wow.
But as I've got older and wiser, hopefully, I think the turning point for me was when one of my friends had an abortion, and she wasn't young when she had it, and it was purely a contraceptive thing I can't think of the word, but after the event. And at the time I was like, oh yeah, I actually took her to the place. I actually drove her to the place. And afterwards, something hit me afterwards where I realized I had taken part, very loosely taken part in the death of this child. And the thing that was interesting for me as well afterwards, that immediately after, she went through a period of depression that probably lasted 5-6 years. And towards the end of that, she then decided to have a child. And before that, she'd never wanted a child ever. You know, she was one of those people, I don't want to get married, I don't want to have children. So obviously the hormonal impact of being pregnant and then having an abortion changed her completely, you know, changed her mindset completely. And I kind of witnessed all that. And just from a moral point of view, nothing to do with religion, you know, it's a life, and I can't get beyond that. It doesn't matter, you know, now I just think, no, that's a life. And finding out as well how it's done, it's horrific. You know, I won't go into the details unless people want to, but it's not a nice, you know, painless operation, you know what I mean, for the child. It's horrific what happens. And I don't know, I think that's why. I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not sure.
No, that's interesting. And Anne mentioned at the top of the show that it was like 50 years ago that Roe versus Wade was passed. And I think something really interesting about that people don't think about is that in the 70s or whenever it was, or 80s. So when my mom had me, I was born in the 80s. She said that the doctor was like, "Oh yeah, look there's its head and its feet," and ultrasounds were so terrible that you couldn't really tell anything. Like if you weren't a professional, you had no idea what you were looking at. And I find it hard to believe. Like, okay, so easy. It was easier back in the day to be like, no, it's a clump of cells. It's a lot easier to tell people that. But now we can see. Now we have like 4D, you know, ultrasounds where you can see the baby. You can see it sucking its thumb. You can see its facial features. And I don't understand like how people are going even more all in for this when it's like so obviously not a clump of cells. It's like so obviously a perfect baby.
Well, and I mean, to a certain extent, you can have, you know, just like a little bit of imagination. But it's like you don't need as much imagination. And I mean, look,
but that's my point. You know, my mom loved me and wanted to have me, and she was still like, you look like nothing to me. That ultrasound picture looked like crap. I have no idea what it was. So it's just
imagination.
You know, so since technology has gotten so much better and we know so much more, it's like now it's what Anne always says: don't believe your eyes, your lying eyes. You know, it's you know, believe what I'm telling you, not what you can actually see. And it's just
even before that point, though, with technology now, if you go back to 50 years, back to the because it was early 70s Roe v. Wade, wasn't it? You know, the knowledge about pregnancy and contraception wasn't the same as it is now. You know, now people who do find themselves pregnant aren't going to be as stigmatized as they might have been in the 60s and the 70s. You know, if you were in 1968, if you were pregnant, you know, you were a fallen woman, you know, if you weren't married, you know, and you were shunned by society. That wouldn't ever happen now. So there's the reasons behind having an abortion are different, I think, now. I don't think the emotional scarring of society or family is a valid reason anymore, personally.
Yeah, it's sort of a weird swing back and forth, because on one hand you have look, if you were pregnant in 1920, no one was like, is it a kid? I don't know. Is this a human being? I'm really confused. That there was a higher value for children, but a higher stigma for, you know, having a kid out of wedlock. So
right.
And you know, that it was more of a shame and a hidden thing and oh well, this and that, but there was no question of, well, this is a child. And now it's like, no, that's not a kid. And also there's no stigma. And it's like, hang on, the kid is still valuable no matter what the circumstances are. And trying to that sort of mind shuffle that because the family was more valued, that there was a more you know, that was a higher thing. But now the family is not valued. The kids themselves aren't valued.
Well, it's that, you know, back in the 1800s here, whether this was the same over there, I don't know, but a family would have 7 or 8 children. 5 of them would probably die as infants. So they had lots of children. So it's kind of like, well, now because those children would die, they valued them. Whereas now,
Right.
because they will all live,
But
it's almost like they don't.
I would historically, I would say that you would have a higher death rate, but like nobody is sitting around in the 1800s going, "Oh crap, my 10 children lived. What a bummer." No, they're happy for it.
Yeah.
Like I thought
probably
at least a couple of you would die of,
Yeah, well, if all 10 of their children lived, they were probably going around going, well, guess what? I got all my kids are good. Like, not this crap now.
Well,
Where
they'd
they're
be
like,
working, wouldn't they? They'd be down the pit, or in a loo in a mill, doing work for them.
right.
And
But,
that's an interesting question too. Sorry, you're saying.
oh no, I was just gonna say that Taryn has a really good point. That it's not about the life of the child; it's about convenience. And now we've got California that's saying if a baby dies up to like 28 days after its birth, we're not going to investigate it. Like, so what? If I have postpartum depression and I smother my kid, nobody's going to look into that. It's fine. It just, right. It's bonkers. Absolutely.
What's weird
bonkers.
about that is I think it was a year or 2 years ago, I remember sharing that they were planning to do that, having the post-birth abortion. And people were saying, oh, you're stupid. You just, you're into these conspiracy theories. And it's like, and now it's real.
Yeah, it's terrible. Nobody would really do that to their babies. And now they're like, let me kill my baby after it's born. And number one, sorry, I've been through labor. Dude, it's not something that you want to like go through and then be like, man, I'm done. Like, it's not like a walk in the park, guys. I mean,
well, isn't that one of the reasons why is to create that bond? Isn't that one of the reasons they say that there is so much pain? That without the pain, the mother doesn't necessarily have that bond with the baby. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I've heard that.
Maybe.
Oh, sorry, Quan.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say that, like Neil, so much of, the arguments for abortion are emotional arguments that, oh, well, it's such a hardship, it's this or that. And then totally forgetting, like you said, with your friend, that, the emotional bond with mother and child and the depression that creates. And I didn't think it would matter, and now it does. And how many people do you hear of who is like, no, I had a kid and my entire life changed, like my entire world sort of centered around my child suddenly. And I didn't, like, they weren't expecting that. And then we're taking that and sort of, it's making it very, it's a clinical. Sorry.
She gone.
Sorry. It's like a tooth pulled. Who cares? Go. And it's not. That this is one of, the emotional and psychological, just how we are literally wired as people. The biological imperative that is so often ignored and we get that in other things too, that you have, lots of young women who don't have kids. Hi, I'm also a young woman who don't have kids, but you get lots of them who are like your friend. I don't want kids. I don't want to get married. I don't want any of that. And then they hit a certain age and they're like, wait, I do. And for some of them, it's too late. And that is incredibly emotional and painful for them. And there's a lot of like, oh, you don't need kids. You won't want kids. You just want a job. And then you get to the end of your life and you realize that family is important, or you realize other stuff like that, that it's, I'm not saying that absolutely everybody has to go have a family, but to ignore that as a thought, I think is very dangerous. And
yeah, because sorry, go on.
No,
I was going to say nobody on their deathbed ever says, "I wish I'd worked harder and longer." Nobody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's true. The most important thing in life is people, and even from a, from a consequences standpoint, from a, the future is there for those who show up for it. If you're, whatever your family structure is, if your family structure is going to last into the future, you got to have kids. Sorry. And you can, not that you can't have a positive impact on people in your lifetime too, but it's biological. It's how we're run. It's this and that, it's
what I don't understand. And this is as not being emotional, having no connection. I don't have kids myself, not being a mother, not a woman, blah, blah, blah. Believe it or not.
Sure?
Difference. Yes, I do know the difference. I have a biology degree. No, I don't. But one of the things I think about is my instinct when I see people out around and about is that if I saw a child in danger, my instinct is to save that child. I'm assuming that if it was my child, that instinct would be stronger, but I would still have that instinct for somebody else's child. And what I don't understand is I don't have that parental bond, yet I still have a strong sense of making sure somebody isn't hurt. So when I hear, like today, I tweeted about one of our knitting friends who said recently that she was complaining because white women were reporting black women for leaving their children in hot cars. And she was furious about this, saying how, white's privilege. And it's like, no, children left in hot cars die, as do dogs, as do anything that's, vulnerable. I can't understand that mentality. So that's one of the other reasons why I can't understand killing an unborn baby.
Right. I totally missed that, but it's not white privilege. You know what happens? If I'm going somewhere with my kids, I don't leave them in the car because they are too young. I could get like in trouble for leaving them in the car because they are not old enough. So one thing if you leave like a 16-year-old in the car who like knows what to do, but you leave a kid strapped into their car seat, that's just.
Did you hear that awful story about the guy in America that was arrested? He was arrested and he didn't bother telling the police that his young child was in the car, and nobody found him for 2 days. So he died in the car. It's like all he had to say to the police was, "Oh, my child's in the car." But obviously he was thinking, no, they'll take my child into social care or whatever. But that is what I don't understand. And that's how I relate it to abortion, is how, because I don't know, when you're pregnant, do you feel anything towards that unborn child? At what point did you feel that deplorable? When did you first feel a connection?
Well, personally for me, it was a little weird because I had been told for at least a decade that I wasn't able to have kids. And so for much of my first pregnancy, I spent a long time going like, this doesn't feel real. Is there really going to be a baby at the end of this? Like I loved it, but I wasn't connected to it until the end, until like it was obvious that everything was going okay and we were going to get through it and I was going to have a baby at the end. And I actually talked to a therapist about that because I'm like, I kind of feel bad about my baby, but they said, well, you've spent so long thinking you wouldn't have one that it's a normal thing. But there's this thing that happens to women, and some people have it more than others, but it's you get like phantom baby kicks, and I still get that. And the feeling that I feel when that happens, like my heart flutters, and I because it's such a special time in your life when you get to have your baby in you, and it's moving and rolling, and it's the only time in the whole life that you don't have to worry about them because they're right here. Even once they're out, once they're born, you got worry that there's SIDS and crazy people, and have people watch them. And I don't know. I don't understand how people, like I said, it took a while for me to like believe I was going to have a baby, but I always loved it and I always wanted to have it. It was just, it was really weird. It was a really weird situation. But
do you think that is part of the reason why some women choose to have an abortion then, because they can't see it, that therefore it's not really real?
I think that there's a lot of that because, even though I wanted my kids and stuff, it really took a long time personally for me to feel like it was a real baby. And it was much later in my pregnancy, around 20 weeks, they start moving. That helped. But once, your stomach gets big and they punch you and you can see them punch you and stuff, then it's like, okay, that's really there's something in there.
Or do you feel like John Hurt in Alien?
But if you're not even getting to that point, it's weird. It's weird when you are pregnant at first and you don't feel any different and you don't feel, so it's probably really easy to write it off and be like, yeah, it's not a big deal. It's nothing there. It's just a clump of cells. I don't know.
So you asked me before, like, why am I against abortion? Why are you two against abortion?
Well, I believe that every person is God made it and knows who it is and is destined to be where it's supposed to be. And it's a person and it deserves to live. And yeah.
So how, sorry, Anne, I didn't let you to answer. So, go on, Anne.
I'm going to answer. I mean, there's the, individual, at conception, it's an individual with its, with their own DNA, with their own, things are set immediately, like hair color, eye color, everything, like even at the smallest cellular level, that is an individual separate from the parent. But also, I'm going to answer your question by answering another question that you didn't ask, a slightly more difficult question, because a lot of times with abortion, that people will say like, oh, well, what would you say to single mother, poor and in a drug situation and this and that kid has nothing, or let's say that, she has an abusive spouse and the kid's going to be abused and everything there. And what really just the horrifying thing about abortion for me, and even if this child's going to be born and this child is going to have a terrible life, like that, the idea that the attitude towards a lot of the children that are supposed to be, quote, prime candidates for abortion are that this child is worthless, that their life is just going to be bad, that they're just going to perpetuate the whole thing. And that in itself is just a huge shock for me. Just look, this child is an individual, and this child, maybe their life is terrible and maybe they're awful and maybe they're going to be bad people too, but you have to give them the choice. They need to be given the choice to do what they will with their own lives, if it's good or bad. And you can be a good or bad person in any situation. In fact, not all human beings are great. We're all not great, but it's the choice. It's the choice to be better. It's the choice of do what you want with your life. And your choices as a human being are not going to be my choices, but they're yours. You have to be given the opportunity to do well. And so the idea of, oh, well, kid, your mom's on drugs and your life's going to be bad. It's like, no, they have to have the opportunity, even in whatever situation they are. And another way too, so I know a couple of ladies who were abused as young children, and often the argument comes forward for incest and rape and these horrible situations. And I don't know, it just makes me upset, because it's like, are you saying not that they were born of that, but that's something that they suffered through in their young lives, and something that they now never want their kids to experience, and they never want other people's kids to experience? Are you saying that because they suffered these awful things, their lives themselves are worth less? That the rest of their lives are not as valuable or as caring because of these things that happened to them? And just the fundamental values of human beings to be what they want to be is so devalued here that's one of the reasons I'm against abortion. So
good answer.
Yeah, and so much more eloquent.
Well, it's making me think of the Dyer that we were talking about earlier. I think it was one of the things that triggered our decision to do this, where she said that she'd been abused as a child and she wishes her mother had aborted her. And then years later, she had 2 abortions herself. She now has a child and a family. And I just would love to speak to her and say, well, do your abortion now. Do your mother's abortion now. If your life is so bad, why you won't end your own life,
right?
So why not?
And okay, so for people who missed it, on Instagram, there's a dyer named Nicole Frost. I'm calling her out because she put her name out there. So she did it on her public account. So she said that she wishes her mother had aborted her. Okay. Because her mom abused her and she went through a cycle of addiction and depression and a lot of things and had a pretty bad life for a while. And then she went through lots of therapy, and then she met a nice guy. And now she has a family. So what I want to know is, how can you say, I wish I was aborted? You have a fulfilling job that you appear to very much like online. You are always talking about how blessed you are to have your kids and to do things with them. So to say, I wish my mother had aborted me, then that means that everything you're doing in your life is useless and worthless. And how can you say that? How can you say that? And so she said that, and she's one of the people who shouts for abortion. The last time she talked about it, I was completely disgusted, because she was doing like one of those get ready with me for the day, and she was putting her makeup on and talking about her abortion. And it was just it was such a casual, like, I'm getting ready for my day and I'm going to tell you about how many babies I've killed. Like, I just, blah. But so the first one was killed. And I'm going to stop saying abortion. People are killing their babies. Okay. So she killed her first baby when she was still messed up on drugs, addicted, whatever she was doing. And she says that if she hadn't killed that one, she would have been stuck in poverty and whatever forever. And then afterwards, she got sober. She met her husband. She had her one child. And then she apparently right afterwards got pregnant again and utilized services to kill her second baby, so that it wasn't too close to the one she had, and she had a difficult C-section, and it would have been, very difficult to have another difficult C-section. And so it kills me. I know people who've had abortions. I love them. They did it for reasons. I'm never going to shame anyone for doing it. But talking about it so carelessly is what bothers me most of all. You killed your baby, and then you had a kid, and then you decided to kill another one before you had another one. Like, how can you decide which of your children is more important? Apparently the two that she birthed are more important, because the other two didn't matter. Like, my head, I can't even.
The one she killed would have hindered her ability to do something. So it's very selfish. It's almost like, just because you're an adult, why does your life take precedence over somebody else's? And nobody should expect a happy, safe life. That doesn't come with, that isn't part of what happens when you're born. You can be poor, you can be miserable, you can be abused. All sorts of things happen to all sorts of people. And nobody, should automatically get a great life. That just isn't the way the world is it?
Right.
Sorry,
and you talk about, you don't get to choose your circumstances. My mom and my dad, they got pregnant when they were 18 and 19. Mm-hmm. They were poor. My dad tells the story about there was a hill in the town to get out to the hospital when they were in labor with my brother. They just stopped the car and put oil in it to get up the hill to go out of town to go to the hospital. Right. And so
she had to push the car.
Yeah, probably my mom was driving and my dad's behind. I don't know, but that's the story. And I know, like, it had no floorboards in some spots because that's the situation they were living in, right? And that doesn't make my brother's life less meaningful. It doesn't.
Yeah, that's something that really. Sorry, not to pause your story.
No, it's good.
No, it's something that gets me too. There's the bad situation argument, but just because you don't have money, you can't have kids. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe some people value their family more than they do money.
Right. And it's hard. And I understand it is hard when you don't have money. I went through divorce and there were weeks I ate like boxes of cereal because I couldn't go get other groceries. Like, you know what I mean? It's not an easy spot to be in. But you know what my parents did? My dad worked an off shift. On days he was off, he either got overtime or he bartended. My mom worked. They didn't have a lot of family help. They on purpose did their schedules so that they could work opposite shifts so that somebody was always with us. And I didn't really think about it, but I remember, I don't know, being 4 or 5, and my dad was always the one putting us to sleep because my mom was managing Burger King and she had to close. And so, and then she would come home and my dad would go work some shit shift, and that's just life. And it's not always pretty and it's not always perfect. And people seem to think like, well, if I don't have, $100,000 in the bank and a car and a house and I don't know, you have to Okay, I'm reading a book. It's called Outliers, and it's about people who are amazing in their field. And a lot of it comes down to, according to the book, about how much you put into it. Like, one of the examples was Bill Gates. I know we don't really like him, but he was born at the perfect time. He had the interest and the drive to learn about programming, and he put the time in. And that's part of what made him who he was. And so, if you're not going to do it, if you're not going to put the time in, if you're not going to do it, then you're not going to thrive. But if you choose, you can.
And how do you know that unborn child isn't going to? I mean, I know it's probably the statistics don't show this, but it could be a genius,
right?
This child could, cure AIDS. This child could, be the next Mozart. You just don't know, do you? It might be your way out of poverty.
It could be, or again, my thing, it's like, well, maybe he doesn't cure AIDS. Maybe he's just a shift manager at the Quickie Crap the rest of his life, but he has a choice. Right. He has a chance, Maybe he enjoys it, maybe he doesn't,
You don't know who that person is that you are killing. You are killing a unique person. They could have been the one to cure cancer. They could have, I don't know. I don't know what they could have done, but you took the choice away from them. You took the life away.
Dinner party. It doesn't matter.
I know, right?
It still has value.
I did a tiny bit of research on British abortions and found out that 98.1% of all British abortions are elective.
Mm-hmm.
So not for any medical reason or, mother dying or the child being, something wrong with it, just because they wanted to. And I just wondered if that's a similar statistic in America, if you know.
It is. Before we got on here, I was trying to look it up. I had it in my stories and I just could not pull it up. But it was like 0.006% are because of incest and 0.01% are because of rape. And it was all of these numbers. And then there was like a huge number, 98 or 99 point something, that was because they wanted to. That's what it comes down to. And it's kind of like, it kills me.
Because that's always the argument for, isn't it? It's like, all
Matt
these
says the rare thing disappeared.
Brother,
Yeah. And but it's I just don't understand how people can do it. And then and I want to say I'm not totally in line with some of these bills that Republicans are trying to push through. There's one that says that you can't have an abortion if you have an ectopic pregnancy, which is a non-viable pregnancy that can kill the parent. It didn't implant into the uterus. It's not going to become a baby. It can't. Yeah. So
right. That some people are like, well, what about this for abortion? It's like, I mean, I wouldn't technically. You could put that in the abortion thing, but I'm like, that is a medical procedure in that, like you said, it's a non-viable pregnancy. That baby cannot fully grow and develop.
It can't develop, and so
it would die anyway. Yeah,
it's going to die. Probably a mother that's not taken care of.
Right.
So it's no good. And then another bill. It may have been the same bill, but there was another one that said that they were going to get rid of IUDs. And somebody in the comments had said that after they had their kids, they had an IUD placed because they knew they didn't want more kids. I don't understand why we're going to make it harder to get good birth control. If you know you have 2 kids and that's what you want, and now you can't get the things you need to take care of it.
Yeah, I think there's something that we have to acknowledge is that the birth control pre getting pregnant, the adoption services after giving birth, and also counselling for all sorts of different stages along the way is seriously lacking in both our countries. And I think all of the money was put into those and possibly other things that I'm not even thinking about at the moment. The lives might be saved, and the girls and the women that don't want to be pregnant could still have, good lives that they want, as well as still having a child that lives. Because the thing, it's almost like, when you split up with someone, it's like, I don't want you, but I don't want anyone else to have you either. Do you know what I mean? It's like, this child, I just don't want it, so therefore it can't even live. Whereas, why don't you want to have it and let it go and live with somebody else? Is it because there'll be an attachment there that you can't then give it away? which then thinks, well, why should you be getting rid of it anyway?
Yeah, it's sort of a, well, I don't know what will happen to the child. It's like, what if the child suffers? Well, what if the child's dead?
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Cowgirl has a good question. What do we say about people who want it to be legal because they're worried about people dying from botched abortions?
Well, that is a tricky one.
Botched abortions in Planned Parenthood.
That is true. That's actually something I had wanted to look up, but it was lunchtime here and I was feeding my kids instead. But I wanted to see, they say that the US has the highest rate of maternal death. And I wanted to see how that correlates with abortion, because we also probably have, I don't know, I'm just talking out my butt right here, but seems like we have a pretty good amount of abortions. So it seems like that could correlate to the maternal deaths. I don't know.
We do.
If we had a society that was more supportive to pregnant girls, pregnant women, would they go to a backstreet abortionist? That's the thing to wonder. Is that where we have to look at these things prior to the pregnancy itself anyway? Because what I don't understand is, like, it's so modern now. Every child over the age of 13 probably knows every sexual position that is possible because they've got access to it all on their computers. But do they still don't know how to not get pregnant? Do you understand what I mean? Like, where's the gap? Why is that happening?
Yeah. Sorry, I just totally lost what I was going to say.
Well, I was going to say, and among things, not really pertinent to our current debate. So mentioned and then skip. I mean, if y'all want to talk, yeah. But that abortion is also a profitable industry.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So among things that have shocked me to my core are pictures of mice at a university in Pittsburgh where they have grafted on the scalps of aborted babies onto them for different medical testing. And the hair is light and fluffy and just like an infant's. And because it is an infant's, because an infant died for them to do this medical procedure. And they talk about selling baby parts fresh, not frozen, like chicken. Okay. And just, sorry, the shock and disgust of that is.
Yeah, you gave me the chills talking about the scalp thing.
A few years ago, somebody sent me, because I was doing some anti-abortion thing, which is not connected to knitting or anything to do with this. And somebody actually sent me the price list, the American price list for the parts of the baby's body. Now, the thing is, I don't know whether that was real. I've got to say, I don't know whether that was an official thing or whether someone just made it up for propaganda reasons. But the baby, the older the baby is and the more intact it is, the more value it has. But like, it's sold as if you were going to a butcher. Like 3 limbs cost this amount, a liver costs this amount, the heart costs this amount, 1 eye is this amount, 2 eyes is a little bit more. And these are sold to science purposes, in inverted commas, but also for weirdos for whatever reason they might want it, because I think anyone can buy it if you know who to go to. And allegedly, Planned Parenthood, they're literally trucking these dead bodies out, every day, selling them. They're making a ton of money because I think someone was filmed, weren't they, admitting it from Planned Parenthood.
That was a while ago. I think Project Veritas did it, where they talked about it.
Yeah.
A few years, isn't it? 5 years or so, maybe 6 years.
It's been a while. But Wombat of Doom is saying that, if you want to know more about it, you can follow Abby Johnson, because she used to run it, or she was very high up, and she wrote a book about it. And I think there's a movie, and so there's a lot of information if you wanna. She's got that.
Well, isn't it true that some? Oh, sorry, Anne, go on. Sorry.
No, you continue first. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm sure I saw something on a video where somebody rang Planned Parenthood to get advice how not to get pregnant, and they turned around and said, "Oh no, we don't do that here," because all they do is abortions.
Right, and that's the thing. It's like, oh, but it's important medical procedures for women. No, it isn't.
Right.
And
Well, that's the thing. They say, oh, we provide other health care for women, but you try to get other health care and it's not that easy to come by.
right. And I think that was I think it was one of the like older Project Veritas videos, like one of those that sort of got them on the mainstream was coming in as, obviously a pimp and a prostitute
Oh my
going
God.
into Planned Parenthood. And they mentioned having young girls, with them. And like, it, that's another thing for abortion that's sorry, I've only seen 2 episodes of Call the Midwife. Not a fan, but I know other people like it. But what is one of your biggest groups of people that abortion is used for? Is prostitution, is people in these bad situations. Okay, so this is helping perpetuate that problem as well. Like there's a lot of horrible circumstances that this touches and that are being ignored for this issue. Sorry.
And sex work is legitimate work and we should destigmatize it. Don't you know? You don't follow enough leftist accounts apparently, because that's something I see all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, how dare you?
Yeah.
Racist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm against? This is going to sound crazy. I am against the abuse of women. It's
Go
not
figure. And it kills me too that all of these people who are fighting for this stuff, they're like, oh, we need it in our Black communities. Do you know that it was targeted to the Black communities because Margaret Sanger was a racist and wanted to get rid of them? Like,
Yeah,
where
was she
is
a
this
eugenicist?
people? Yes, she was like, I don't like Black people, so let's start pushing this shit. Like, for real.
That's the thing, though, that there's a lot of tweets going out of, oh, well, Republicans wouldn't be anti-abortion if they knew how many, Black and brown babies would be born. I'm like, please, I want more kids to live. Okay, there's so many kids being killed right now, and so many of them being killed for flimsy reasons, not as if they should ever be killed, but it's like, no. This is horrifying and I want them to survive. And they're like, well, because you're a Republican, you must not want them to live. Because I'm like, no, please. It's the Republicans complaining about all of these children being killed. And also, sorry, slightly to the side, but another thing is they're like, oh, well, Christians, and they just want the babies to be born. They don't care about what happens to them afterwards. And if Christians cared about babies, then the government would give them money from cradle to grave. That, oh, well, you want government programs this and government programs that, when, Christians are doing, option 1 pregnancy centers, and they're doing counseling, and they're doing supportive families, and they're doing charity.
The cradle to grave thing, coming from a country that has healthcare, cradle to grave, we don't pay for it apart from out of our taxes. They're still saying the same things. So even if in your country you had something like what we've got, where you don't pay at the moment of using the service, they will still say that it's either racist or it's not good enough. So because we have that, we don't pay for any of our medical care at all. So apart from drugs,
we do, but
one thing I was going to mention was one of the woke knitters. They were saying exactly what Anne just said then about these Christians want these babies to not be aborted, but then they don't care about them when they're born. They don't care about them when they're older, because they don't care about whether they have sex changes or whether they get put on hormone blockers and things like that. And it's like, no, it all comes from the same place. It actually all comes from caring for the child. The reason why you don't want them to be put on hormone blockers is to care for them. It's not to do them any damage. So the argument just doesn't wash for me.
Yeah. And also the sort of Thomas Sowell thing, where we're going from, it's like, oh, well, obviously then there ought to be welfare for all of these people. Welfare itself is such a caustic and destructive thing for people's lives. Like, that's another thing that's like, well, you don't care because you're not handing them money. And I'm like, this destroys people. And this destroys communities. Talking about the, people, like, oh, well, these, inner city Black communities and how that was affected in the 70s with welfare, that, that they're saying that these issues and structures came from slavery. And I know this is a racial issue back and forth, but specifically looking at this at inner city Black communities, that they're like, oh, well, the reason that we have these issues is because of slavery. Right after slavery, that the sort of Black family previous were slaves, ancestors going on, that they had one of the strongest family structures. And then the welfare state came in, and you're rewarded for dad not being in the house because you get less money if your parents are married. And so dad leaves and the family structure is broken up. And, I'm trying to remember what the charity is, but they're talking about how one of your greatest determining factors for success is having a father in the home. And that can't always be the case. And I'm not saying that you can't succeed, that your family life is ruined without one, but that family structure is incredibly important. And ignoring that has hurt communities, and welfare has hurt communities. And these people saying that if you cared about kids, you'd care about government programs is another harmful and caustic thing for children.
The irony here is, back in the sort of 70s, 80s and 90s, is that if you were a young girl and you left school, or even while you were still at school, if you got pregnant and had a child, you were immediately given a home. You were immediately given money. So we had a whole spate of, very, very young fatherless children. But at least those children lived. And those mothers probably would not want to get rid of those children now. They may have considered having an abortion before. So although welfare is destructive in some ways, I think in other ways it could actually help in certain circumstances. But I think none of the sides in the abortion debate sort of ever really can look at is, I think every single pregnant, I was almost going to say person, then I should say woman. Every pregnant woman should be looked at as an individual, what her circumstances are. So when, people talk about rape and incest and things like that, that isn't going to be the norm for every person, but you could look at those individual cases and how to help those individuals, where that has happened to. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought now. I went on one then, didn't I? Sorry.
That's okay. I mean, and I can specify here that for my anti-welfare rant, I'm not saying that nobody should ever be helped monetarily if they're in a bad situation. I'm saying that as a government structure,
right.
And also I'm also for, it's like, charity should not be of the government, that it should definitely be an individual basis issue, that charity should exist outside the government, because that's just its own caustic problem.
It's the mindset of being given things. We need to get out of this. Like, I mean, when I married my husband, I was pregnant with our first child. And if I hadn't married him, I probably would have been better off in the whole scheme of things. But that's not how we roll, because we want the family
better off from a government welfare
from a monetary
I'm pretty sure that you're fond of your husband.
No, I'm just saying, from a monetary situation, my husband at one point said, "Man, we should have just changed your name and never gotten married, and you could have gotten like all these benefits." And it was in jest, but people need to be helped. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that when somebody has a situation and they don't have two dimes to rub together and they're on this, obviously I think people should be helped. But I also think that they on purpose make things hard because they don't want abortion to stop. So it's hard to have, it's hard to adopt. It's expensive. It's long. It's very difficult. We need to change the narration, because people are like, oh, Republicans don't want, they don't care about babies after they're born. Yeah, we do. But we also think that, adoption shouldn't cost $30,000, because that's not feasible.
Yeah. No, it absolutely, that is so difficult to adopt. It is so, and I mean, there's a lot of people who adopt overseas, not saying that they shouldn't adopt people from overseas, but also that it should be easy to adopt kids, and foster care is just,
it's messed up.
It is. And again, it's government bureaucracy, and it's endless, and you can't, and it's difficult to wade through. that, it's the worst parts who are rewarded, and it happens all the time. But yes, getting, adoption much cheaper, much easier to, vet people and go. That, I don't know. It's a really rough situation.
Adoption in the UK, at least it was, I don't know that it's still the case, but if you're overweight, if you smoke, if you've got certain health conditions, you are barred from adopting. And the irony of that is that you could be rich, you could have a fantastic home life, you could be famous and be an actor, but you still can't adopt if you don't, toe the line with these certain health conditions. But anybody can have a baby if they can get pregnant, So you think really that they should be looking at each person on an individual basis. Yes, you might smoke, but would you smoke in front of the child? And if not, then why should that stop you from being able to adopt?
Right.
I think it's one of those situations where we need to, the things that they need to make it easier for people to have babies. They don't want people to stop killing babies. That's the point of it. This is a Satan thing. This is if you don't believe in Satan, it's a morally bad thing that people are pushing, because it continues their agenda. It strengthens their stand on certain issues. It keeps people beholden to the system. There's so many reasons, and if
it creates something. And again, this may disagree with me if you will, but that it creates, if you are gung-ho for abortion and you've had abortions and you think everyone should get one if they want one, and we've talked about people who have felt guilt over their abortions, but also let's say that you don't. And also, let's say that is something in your life that you cannot examine closely. Like, you take that and you shove it in a corner and you say, I did what I did, and that's that. Okay? That level of personal blindness to things and that level of devotion to keeping yourself, don't think about it, that creates a certain psychological thing too. Again, everybody's their own thing, but willful blindness to an issue leading to political support, that gets me. Sorry. It's that there is a certain level of, well, this has to be okay because I did it. And that concerns me a lot. But yeah, that having that for your supporters is an interesting thing. Anyways, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, that makes sense. And so many people are, they push this, but then they say, well, you can't have an opinion on it if you don't have a uterus, or you can't have opinion on it if you don't toe the line with you can have an opinion on anything.
Broken-hearted men are out there. I mean, I've heard stories before, but my girlfriend had an abortion and I didn't know, and how that affects them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the slogan that I despise, I'm not your incubator. If you don't want to be an incubator, don't have unprotected sex. Don't do
one
it.
of the
you are smart.
Yeah, one of the things that men sort of fall foul of in this debate is, well, don't get women pregnant. But the thing is, my view on it is, women. Who is the person ultimately going to have to do everything for that child? It's the woman. It's the mother. So if you are the person who is ultimately going to have to deal with the repercussions of being pregnant, then it's ultimately your responsibility to make sure you don't get pregnant. Hopefully, the father or the man will do the same, but you can't guarantee or rely on that, because they're not necessarily going to have the impact. So if you're impacted by something, you have to look out for yourself.
Right. Well, and not to step into the whole Jordan Peterson family structure biological imperative, but it's like, okay, so who does marriage help? Women. Why? Yeah. Because women bear the brunt of childbearing and taking care of kids. Well, that's much easier if you have someone that you are promised to stick with forever. And divorce and other things, but it's like if there is a defined, we're staying together no matter what, that makes raising a child easier. And that's the whole, you know, marriage and having kids after marriage thing of if we're okay. So and the old 1950s mentality of, you know, it's like, oh, well, you got pregnant out of wedlock and that's bad. Well, why would you specifically say, we're waiting until marriage? Well, because if you get pregnant, it's much better for you to be that protected family structure. It's not just you caring for the kids. It's, you know, you and your husband.
That's true.
It's there for a reason, you know?
And also the community around you, because well, they used to say, didn't they, it takes a village to raise a child, whereas now everything is online. All our communities are online. I don't know, well, I know one of my neighbours, but the rest of them I don't really know. I know to look at, but I couldn't go and knock on, you know, just to have a chat like you used to be able to years ago. So your neighbours could look after your children while you went to the shop for 5 minutes, or you would look after their children, and, you know, everybody looked out for each other because it was a physical community, whereas that doesn't really, well, I'm sure it does exist in some places, but certainly not in cities where I live. You know?
Well, luckily for me, it exists here. I have probably 4 neighbors I could call if I needed to, who would come watch my kids. But what Anne's saying about the family is true. I don't work full time because most of my job is taking care of the kids and the house, and I am a typical housewife, and that's my choice. And I am lucky that I have a husband that can help me do that. And when you devalue a family, when you devalue marriage, that's what happens. Because if there has to be some, you guys know what I'm saying, that if you don't have any respect for it, then you don't see a reason for it, and then everything falls apart. You know, with my husband, I've got my mother-in-law to help me with the kids. I've got my parents to help me with the kids. I've got my husband. You know, it is a village, and it's not.
Well, some people, just to play devil's advocate, some people would then say, well, you know, you're lucky you've got that, but this particular woman on her own who's pregnant hasn't, therefore she should have an abortion. You know, that's what the kind of thing they would say, isn't it?
Right.
Well, like to Anne's point, maybe don't be sleeping with that person that you're not going to have a life with.
Right. Or even again, I would put down that it's like that mother and that child is still valuable. But we've, at the same time, it's like we've, you know, sexual revolution, this stuff isn't important. It's dumb. It's old fashioned. It keeps women back. And it's like, can we just take a second and, you know, it's like, don't tear a thing down before you realize why it was there. You know, just it's an old principle. It's a simple principle. It's like, oh, well, I see this old fashioned principle and I'm not going to do it. I'm going to turn away from it. I'm like, okay, fine. That's your choice, man. But you should at least take a look at it and ask why. Why are things done this way? Why do family structures work? Why is it that this mentality was there? And, you know, if you want to keep going after that, that's fine. But
yeah,
families work for a reason, and the destruction of the nuclear family is there for a reason.
Right. And this is not on that topic at all, but we were talking about when Neil was saying, which people are going to flip their lids over, that it's the woman's responsibility to not become pregnant because ultimately we're the ones that have to deal with it. Which I actually think is a valid point. If you are not in a situation where you can care for a child and want to have a child, you need to be doing what you need to do to make sure you're not having a child.
Yeah. Well, I would also say that 110%. Yeah, 110%.
Yeah. Yeah, don't get me wrong, men should, you know, ensure they don't get people pregnant as well.
No, I agree. But my point is
men should 110% take responsibility, because in all civilized societies, it is the woman who says yes or no to the man. Why? Because she has to think of things like that. That's
right.
Just how it be.
But what I wanted to ask Neil is that there's a huge push for forced male sterilization because they can be reversed. And so therefore, because you are the one that gets us pregnant, you should be sterilized until you're ready to have a family.
So we're talking about. Oh, I'm sitting funny now already.
Okay.
So we're talking about vasectomies, aren't we here?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
two
I
quick
think-
things for.
I think a surgical intervention is something that men just wouldn't do. You know, they're not.
Right.
You know, by force. I think if there was a male pill, you know, some men would, and some men wouldn't. You know, because the thing is, what people don't realize is that if there is no consequences necessarily at the end of the day, men aren't going to think ahead and think, oh, you know, I must make sure this girl that I've just pulled, we're both drunk in this nightclub, I must make sure she doesn't get pregnant. You know, it doesn't happen. But the girl, you know, she's going to know what her, you know, she's going to know that she's going to get pregnant or may get pregnant, you know. So I know it's unfair, but I do think that the majority of that responsibility has to come down on the girl or the woman. And it isn't fair, but it's life. It's just the way it is, because men don't think like that. Certainly not in their youth. You know, most men up until the age of 30, well, maybe a bit younger, but most men, all they want is sex. You know what I mean? They're not bothered about anything else other than getting sex. Most of the girlfriends that you go out with, it's because you're getting sex. Do you know what I mean? It's only when you get older.
Are
that
you
things
saying
change.
that men are sexually driven creatures?
Absolutely, yes. You know, you can imagine all the leftists. No, you can't say that, but they are. Men are. You know, it's you know, if you look at the animal kingdom, you know, that's how it works in the animal kingdom. You know, the females tend to look for the mate that is going to protect their their offspring, and the males are just going to try and impregnate as many females as they possibly can. But also this is completely off topic, but part of this also links into the beta male thing, doesn't it? You know, because now you've got a lot of men that can't get sex for whatever reason, and they're very dangerous. You know,
Back to the animal kingdom a little bit, that we used to have growing up. Our family had chickens, and we had two roosters at one point. They both looked almost identical, and we called them Dave and Other Dave. And Other Dave was clearly the beta male. Dave ruled his little chicken kingdom with a fair and wise hand. Other Dave was cruel. He was cruel to everyone. He was cruel to the chickens. He was cruel to the cats. He was horrible. And Other Dave met his end accordingly. But it is that beta male mentality where it's like, oh, you're lashing out because of something. That it's an issue. And again, chickens are chickens, so whatever. But it really is there. But yeah, that there is, I don't know. It's a very you were talking, before, like, oh, well, men should, not be able to have kids then. And, kind of two different stories there. One of a woman, talking, making reproductive decisions without your spouse goes both ways. She wanted more kids, and he's like, yeah, I just got a vasectomy. And she's like, what? We're married, and I want, what just happened here? And that was a very hard thing for her. But also so birth control, it's your own choice. I want to make that clear, whatever. But messing with people on a hormonal level has consequences. And you get that with hormonal birth control. And there's different things saying that women on birth control are attracted to different men than when they're not on birth control, and for different reasons, which is interesting that they've done studies on this. But it affects your mood. To a certain extent, it affects your personality. And that's something that you have to take into consideration with any medication. But it's like, oh, well, we should just do a procedure so you don't have kids. And that does affect you personally. And that's just another factor that you have to think of in all of this.
Was that study where they found that when women were unable to have children because of the pill, that they were attracted to much more feminine men, whereas when they were able to get pregnant, they were attracted to really sort of rugged men, with big jaws and, built like,
right.
Is that right? Is
that was it, which was really, really curious.
That's really interesting.
But yeah, I don't know. It's like all of these subtle little emotions and, how we work and how we're wired. And, emotions are just a reaction, that we are ultimately in control of ourselves, but our emotions really can swing us in one way or the other, and you can't just discount
So
it.
so going to the hormonal thing, so if it can be dangerous or undesirable for a woman to be on a hormonal contraceptive pill, for example, what would you say, other than abstinence, because we know that isn't going to be a realistic thing, how would you say that a woman should absolutely ensure she doesn't get pregnant if she doesn't want to?
Well, I mean, besides, absolutely ensure, that's a little difficult, but you have condoms, of course. You also have there is, I'm losing what it's called, but it's the thing where you take your temperature, so what time of you can conceive.
Like the rhythm planning or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think most women would do that unless they were actually like in a pretty secure relationship, though, because it's not 100%. I mean, like some IUDs are not hormonal.
Right.
So I guess that would be the way to go.
There are other options, and even hormonal, again, it's a talk to your doctor thing, but
But the IUD thing, did we talk about that earlier, where that is one of the things that the Republicans are trying to ban it, or are they trying to stop it?
In some states, or in some, it's not necessarily gone through, but it was on there with the ectopic pregnancy thing, which makes no sense to me. Like, why would we be making birth control harder to get? That just if you don't want people to abort, you can't make stuff harder. Like make it easier to get. Make it free to get your birth control as opposed to abortions. And then,
but it's free here. It's free in this country, and we still have a ridiculous amount of abortions. So money isn't
your medical. I'm sorry, Neil, but your free medical system is kind of crap. I'm just going to say it.
Well, just to
better than I, but
one of my friends had to make an emergency hospital appointment for something that's classed as an emergency, and they said since COVID, emergency is now classed as a 5-week turnaround. So if you have an emergency operation that you need to have, you have to wait 5 weeks. So, and that's our health system. So although it's great when it works, sometimes it doesn't.
So like if my appendix ruptured, I'd have to wait 5 weeks.
I think if that would be life, imminently life threatening. So I think that's how they kind of differentiate it. I think if you're about to die, they will do it. But if it's an emergency, so in the sense of you're going to be in pain, or there's going to be a repercussion afterwards, that you might lose a leg if you don't have this thing done. I don't know what. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But that is classed as a 5-week thing.
Okay.
It's ridiculous.
That's interesting.
I don't know if all of them do this. Some IUDs act as I can't say that word. Abortifacients.
I'm assuming it means that it causes an abortion if you get pregnant.
Well, that's an interesting thing then, isn't it? Is that okay? Is that classed as an abortion, and do we think that's wrong? I would argue that that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Anne's gonna run out now. She's got other plans, big things to do. So
sorry, I got
other things to do.
Thanks, Anne. We'll see you later.
I'm gonna wave out. Bye, guys.
Have a good time. Bye-bye.
All right. Have fun without me. Bye.
Okay.
Oh, this is weird.
I know, right? It's never just you and me.
Mum's gone.
Oh, okay. So Wombat says that it basically aborts a fertilized egg. So that's interesting, but I don't know.
So does that mean that it doesn't allow the egg to sort of latch into the womb?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. But at least the thing is about that, that's classed as an abortion then in some ways. But for me, personally, I would think that's okay, because I can't imagine at that point that there's any pain involved for the fetus. Whereas I think all the other methods of killing the fetus involve, because they say, don't they, that the first thing to develop when the cells multiply is the nervous system, which I think means that is pain receptors. So they must be able to feel pain, I think. So any death after that must involve pain, whereas at least if it hasn't actually latched on, it might not have pay. It wouldn't be anything at that point, would it? I don't know.
Well, according to like biblical beliefs, yeah, it would be something. But see, this is where it gets hard because, I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
There's a lot of grey areas, isn't there? Well, did you read about the Jewish thing? I didn't know about this because apparently there was a big outcry amongst the Jewish community because somewhere in I don't know whether it's in the what I would call the Old Testament or whether it's in the Torah, but apparently it's actually okay. You know, it's. But I was thinking I don't know about that, and most of the Jewish stuff kind of transferred over, you know, into the Old Testament of Christianity, didn't it?
That's not something I know anything about, so I can't even pretend I haven't.
Are there any Jewish people watching that could put a comment in and say whether they know anything about that? I don't know if there is.
Yeah, Wombat's saying that life is at conception, which means the egg is life, and but
see, that's where I would draw a line personally. But then that's because I'm not religious. I would think that's okay, but if you were religious, I suspect that you wouldn't.
Denise has got the question about what about people paying for their employees to travel to get abortions, because some states are going to ban it. And so like, because I'm in New York, there's a big deal about like, oh, you can come to New York and blah blah blah, and you know.
I've heard a couple of the woke knitters saying they will drive people to the abortion clinic, no questions asked. No, I don't agree with that. I think, you know, I don't know. The question is why, first of all. If it was for a genuine medical reason for the mother as well, you know, then yeah, that surely that would be covered under the healthcare, so they wouldn't even need the employer to do that. But I don't know. No, I would say no to that.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it personally. I mean, if this is something that you feel is really important to be able to have access to, I guess that you should try to locate yourself in one of those states. I mean, if you live in a state that doesn't approve of abortion and you really feel you're going to need one, I don't think your company should pay for you to do it.
Well, here we've got England, Scotland, and Wales, and all free and available for abortions in this on the mainland, shall we say? But in Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom, it's not. So a lot of the Northern Irish girls or women that want abortions have to come over to here to do it. But to me, I think, well, I think abortions should not be easy to obtain. You know, they should be quite difficult to obtain. So you've got as much time as possible to reconsider what you're doing. You know, I think because here two doctors have to say it's okay for a woman to abort the child, but I don't even think that's enough. You know, because they're just going to agree with each other, because you'll have a surgery of say 4 doctors and they'll just send them into the next room, you know, so they're not going to say no because they're working for the same surgery. But I don't think that that's enough, you know.
Right. And here we just give them out like Tic Tacs. I mean, do you get one and you get one and
Oprah.
Yeah. When I say that I'm against abortion, I mean, I am. Don't get me wrong. I believe that babies are babies and that it's killing them. But I also believe that there are some situations that don't follow the standard lines. And like, okay, so if I'm pregnant and for some reason my uterus has gone septic and I'm going to die, yes. If it's a choice between me or my baby, you know, something's got to, I don't know. Not that I would
the
say
old Catholic view, I don't know whether this is still the case, but the Catholic view was that in a case where either the mother or the baby would die, the Catholic view is to let the mother die and the baby is to live. Whereas most people would say, well, actually, no, I think the mother should be saved if both of their lives are at risk and only one can be saved.
Well, I guess that kind of, it goes to like, is the baby viable? If you tell me to save a 22-week baby, I mean, most of those don't make it. So like, there are things about it. But my point is that I don't think that it should be a blanket thing. I think that there should be exceptions because nothing ever is perfectly in line with everything. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, if you've got a child that has been impregnated by her brother, and they're both also they're the children of an incestuous thing as well. They've been living in a mountain somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and that child is clearly going to be, I don't know, not going to have a viable life. Then maybe that would be an argument. But then people would say, what about children with Down syndrome? Now, I think, some of the happiest people I've ever met are people with Down syndrome. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't know huge amounts of people with Down syndrome. I know a few, but they have wonderful lives because they see everything through a lens of sort of happiness. So, and that a lot of Down syndrome fetuses are killed.
Right. And that's the thing that I don't like. And then there's some situations where they say, oh, your baby has this defect or that defect, and the testing is wrong. And so the baby is born perfectly fine and healthy. So if you're using this to base on whether or not they should live, that's not okay either. There's so
Here's a question for you.
Hmm.
Here's a question. If a doctor can make a mistake when he's gendering your baby, does that not mean he can make a mistake when he's telling you your unborn baby has some kind of defect and should be aborted?
Right.
They can't have it all ways, can they? Because that's the thing. They want to have it all ways.
Well, they want to have it all ways. And that's the problem. You're exactly right. That is the problem. They just, and Wombat, she's so good today. You don't make laws based on a few hard cases. And that's exactly it.
Yeah, everybody has to be looked at as an individual, because there will always be a case where somebody ends up saying, yeah, that child should be aborted. Might just be one, but that case will be the one that they would latch on and use as, the template for all of the cases.
Yeah, like, the example of the baby that's being formed and the brain isn't growing or the kidneys aren't growing or something that is going to cause them to not live outside the womb. They take that situation, which is a horrible, terrible thing, and then they say, well, because of this, everybody should have access. Well, really, though? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's is there anybody watching that is pro-abortion or pro-choice? Is there anybody willing to? I'm probably too scared to say anything in case we all dive on. I can't imagine anybody watching us would be pro-choice, really. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if the trolls have found us yet, so maybe later. But Wombat's saying that she's been working on this since the 80s. And in the 90s, my mom used to work for Crisis Pregnancy Services, which did a lot of counseling for women that were pregnant and needed options and help and choice. And they needed choice, but they needed to know what their options were. It's not, we live in a world where the option is you have to kill your baby. They don't realize that there are people out there that are willing to help, that there are different organizations that they can reach out to, and that's another part of the problem, is that we're living in this world where, like, you can have choice as long as it's the same choice as me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's been quite a strange coincidence with, sorry, I'm going to plug the magazine. The magazine's about to be released any day now. But Anna Nitter, does anybody know Anna Nitter? She's German, and she wrote an article for the magazine, but she also sent a little baby sock pattern. And she's part of an organization in Germany that is very pro-life and very anti-abortion. And this I think it's called the Welcome Baby Sock Project. And the idea is that they're there to support women that end up pregnant and don't want to be, to help them through it. So, because often they're saying that the crisis that they're going through isn't necessarily a crisis that it needs to be. So, for example, if the father's disappeared, that doesn't need to be the reason to kill that child. There is somebody there that will help you. Money isn't necessarily the reason to kill your child. So I thought it was worth mentioning that, because that's because what we're thinking of doing is trying to find similar organizations in every country and see if there's something we can put somewhere where there's like a resource for people, to actually try and do something positive, rather than, just say, oh, it shouldn't happen, people shouldn't have abortions. Because the problem is what is their alternative? We need to make sure they've got a good alternative somewhere.
Yep. And here's a good one. I'm pro-choice: adoption, parenthood, abstinence, birth control. Those are all choices you get to make, right? So,
yes, yeah.
And Wombat says that Anna's a friend of hers, so that's cool. I actually,
Did I get that right, by the way?
Hmm?
Who was it who said they were a friend of Anne? I just want to check that I got it right. You know, what I was saying was correct. Wombat. Yeah. I know
She's
Wombat.
used to everybody.
Wombat, I have to say that I've said to her, her username is my favorite of anyone's I have ever seen ever. I'll just love it because it gives me an image in my mind of this little creature.
That's too funny. Nancy says, "Hey, Santa." But we've gone really long, and actually, my phone's going to try to die. So, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think we we didn't really talk much about the people that have what they've been saying, you know, on the left, really. But I suppose that might be for the best.
Well, I mean, the reason you and I started talking was because I saw that one thing of the woman shouting her. I gotta say, that's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. Shout your abortion. Yes, let's be proud that we've killed babies. Did
you see that picture of the woman who has a T-shirt? I don't know whether it's real, but she says, "I've had 20 abortions."
See, now that's a woman that needs to get some education in what birth control is.
Because you think at least after the first one. I think after, you know, that's the thing. At least after the first one, somebody should have intervened at some point. You know, if after the 19th abortion you're still getting pregnant, that's a problem.
See, now maybe she should have been taken care of when she was an infant because obviously her brain didn't develop properly if she's having 20 abortions.
Who was the actress as well? There was an actress that when she was, I think it was an Oscar, she was accepting the Oscar. This is a few years ago.
Was it Michelle Williams?
Was it? I'm not sure. She said, if I hadn't had my abortion, I wouldn't have this Oscar. And you just think, really, that piece of metal is worth more than what a child could have been to you.
Yep.
You know, that's kind of like the epitome of the problem, isn't it?
It is. And these are people who have
Oh, really? Oh.
No, but she
Sorry, nobody knows what we're reacting to here, are we? Nancy just said there's a troll and she talks about sucking the little bastard out of there.
Yeah.
God. Horrible.
Yeah, so but these women who are so proud of it. Stevie Nicks did too, someone said, but I know Michelle Williams did too.
Yeah, I think in her autobiography, she claims that one of the other bandmates made her have an abortion, I believe. I might be wrong on that, though. Someone here is 100% pro-choice. A woman's body is hers. Well, my argument there, Lisa, is that, yes, her body is hers, but the fetus isn't hers. You know, that's its own body right from the beginning. It's its own body. And one of the things about that is that if you were pregnant, so for example, let's say you were pregnant now, deplorable, and somebody, I don't know how they could do this, but if somebody managed to kill your baby while it was inside your womb without harming you, is that okay?
No, and I think that's a homicide.
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? It would be a form of murder or at least manslaughter, depending on how it was done. So why would that not be okay? So why does the baby mean something legally and, you know, morally if you want it as opposed to if you don't want it? That's what I don't understand. You know, surely the life means something or it doesn't across the board. You know, if a fetus doesn't matter, then no fetus matters. Even if you want, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's a really good point about if I want it and you stab me in the stomach and my baby dies, then that's murder or manslaughter. But if I don't want the baby and I have it sucked out of me, then that's fine. It's very strange. It's very strange. Yeah. And what I want to understand is, and I don't want to argue with anybody because I think different viewpoints are valid, and I want to understand. I really
wasn't bullying you there.
But how do you make the difference? How do you celebrate with your friend who wants to have a baby and then say it's okay for your other one who uses it as a form of birth control? That's the difference I don't understand.
It's the language as well, isn't it? So when you're celebrating, you know, your friend getting pregnant and you all talk about the baby, and then when you talk to woman who's planning an abortion, and then you talk about the fetus. You know, it's
Yeah.
all about language. You know, it's like the dehumanizing language. I mean, I know a fetus is human, but the word isn't very human feeling, is it?
Well, the word is used on purpose to separate you from the fact that it's the baby.
Yeah.
And I would like to be able to talk to somebody about it. Because more than anything, you know, people say I'm a racist and a homophobe and whatever, but this is one situation where I have truly been pretty sheltered in at least the majority of the people around me agree with me. And I've never really had a deep conversation with someone that I know well who doesn't agree. And that's something I think that would be really interesting to do, just because.
Well, I've had a few conversations because most of my friends disagree with me on this, and we've come to a point now where we don't talk about it at all.
Right.
But one of the things that they said, there seems to be a common thread. One is my body, my choice. The other one, how dare men tell me what I can do with my body? Men don't carry babies, therefore they don't have a right to even have an opinion on it.
If men are women, can't they have an opinion on it? I'm just saying.
It's fine. I have to work this out. I go right. So pregnant men. Oh, let's talk about pregnant men for a minute.
Let's not.
Do you know, right, this is true. Now, people aren't going to believe what I'm about to say, but in Bristol University, they have a huge medical university there. So most people that become doctors and nurses go through there. And they have a midwifery department. And they taught them in a lesson recently that men can have babies via their penises. This is true. Biological men can give birth through their penises. And that, look it up in the news, it happened.
But they do know that that's not true, right?
Apparently, it's true.
Okay. This isn't quite the same thing, but just because my kid says they're a cat doesn't mean they're actually a cat, right? Like, just because you say something doesn't mean it's true.
Well, somebody was saying that somebody they knew had, I don't know which stone it is, but is it liver stone? I don't know. One, if you have stones like gallstones or liver stones, one of them you have to actually pass when you go into the toilet. And they were saying that they're tiny. Yeah, and the pain apparently is unbearable. And you imagine, well, any men watching now, imagine trying to get a baby through there. What the hell are they thinking?
My husband had kidney stones, and a woman that we knew said that she had them and that the pain was worse than childbirth.
Really?
Thank God he stopped getting them, because, dude, he could not take it. He was, I love him to death, but I was like, dude, get this taken care of, because I can't take you anymore.
It was Edinburgh. It may have been Edinburgh. For some reason, I thought it was Bristol. I don't know, but it definitely happened here somewhere. And I think what it was, I think the person that did it probably got reprimanded after, because I think they were a very woke professor and they were trying to, you know, muddy the waters, as they say. But yeah, yeah. If you're a man and you're pregnant, you're not a man. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone said ooch. Yes, indeed. It's insane, isn't it?
It's just, I don't know. This stuff is just crazy, man. I'm gonna have to look that up, because that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, if I can find it, I'll send it you, because I did read it and I just couldn't believe what I was reading. Because at first I thought, oh, is this like one of those spoofs? You know, sometimes you get caught out on Twitter and things like that. But no,
you read a Babylon Beast article and you don't realize it's the bee, right? I had that happen to me the other day, because so much of what they say now sounds almost real that you're like, wait, is this? No.
Titania McGrath, isn't it? Have you followed Titania McGrath? Have you ever heard of her?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you're if you're on Twitter, follow Titania McGrath. Where can I post that somewhere? How do I? Oh, I don't know whether I can. I don't know how to type on here. What's wrong with me? No, I don't know how to do it. I think I can send you a private message, but I can't send a public one for some reason. Never mind. I'll put it on my Instagram later. I'll show you what she does. It's a man, but she everything that she said has pretty much come true, because they're able to predict what's going to happen in the future. So a lot of it has been men getting pregnant, but Titania McGrath was posting about it 5 years ago, you know, just as a joke. And so when you get caught out when you read it because you think, what? And then they all jump on it. So in a way, I think Titania McGrath has probably invented most of the woke stuff that's going on. I've seen some of these names. Darby O'Gill, who's that?
No idea.
I don't know.
But
That's some weird conversation in the chat.
We've gone so long, so I'm going to say we got to go because it's been an hour and a half.
Lovely as always.
But yeah, I think there's more to talk about, and if more comes up on the if more comes up on Instagram, we'll have to get back together and talk about it some more. But
well, the other one I think we should do at some point is the whole trans thing.
We do. We need to.
That's a quagmire.
So, all right, guys. Well, so Dobby Gillis was a TV show from the 50s. Oh, and Gilligan. I don't know. Anyway, I missed that whole conversation. But guys, thanks for joining us. And I appreciate it. And if you don't agree, I would like to hear why. Send us an email, comment.
And Lisa, I'm sorry if I was, I don't know that I was a bit harsh with you. I didn't mean it to be like that.
Yeah.
I think it was Lisa, wasn't it?
we would talk for real. As long as you can be kind to us, we can be kind to you. And that would be, I'm interested. So, drop us a line if there's something you want to say. If you want to tell us how you feel we're wrong, we want to hear it.
We're not wrong, though.
Well, you know what I mean. So, but guys, thanks for joining us. And Neil, thanks for making the time today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we will see you later. Bye.
Bye.